We see them in parks, on the street, and even on the subway. There are now more homeless people in New York City than ever before. Studies show that there are more than 50,000 people currently in the shelter system, and this number is increasing steadily.
The shelter population has boomed in recent years because of the lack of true housing policy. It's boomed also because of the recession. People are losing their jobs.
Homelessness in the city has far surpassed the national average. In fact, more than 1 in 4 homeless children in shelters are from New York.
So we've seen the shelter population increase, particularly over the last 10 years following the recession. And we're at a state now where we have people coming in and out of the shelters. Some people go into multiple shelters. And we're at a point where we don't have a lot of housing options for anyone, but especially for the low income in New York City.
Critics have pointed out that the problem is the result of poor public policy on the part of the Bloomberg administration. Giselle Routhier, a policy analyst at the Coalition for the Homeless, says the rise in homelessness has been the single most significant failure of the Bloomberg administration.
Since Mayor Bloomberg took office, the number of individuals sleeping in shelter every night has increased by 60%. That's the biggest change. Every policy decision the mayor has made has led to an increase in people experiencing homelessness. So his policy decisions after that proclamation have not followed suit. At this point in time, now that the shelter system has increased so much, we don't hear anything from him in terms of wanting to decrease the shelter system, right? So that was a proposal several years ago, and now, we hear radio silence in terms of what he's going to do to decrease homelessness.
The coalition criticizes the Department of Homeless Services for the lack of effective housing policies. But the Bloomberg administration blames a consent decree that forces the city to provide housing to all that need it.
So New York City is actually the only city in the nation that has a right to shelter.
Mayor Bloomberg states that this law allows New Yorkers to take advantage of free beds.
You need a place to sleep for the night. New York City is under law required to find shelter for you. But all that means is that they are required to find a cot for you. Have you ever really been to a shelter? A homeless shelter is not the best place to be. So I don't think people are standing in line to sleep in a shelter because they can, because they're so nice. So the idea that the availability or that the policy will increase the number of homelessness doesn't really make sense. It's not rational.
The mayor came under fire recently when he suggested that private jet owners are entitled to shelter.
I think with that comment, Mayor Bloomberg pretty much showed how out of touch he was. No person in the shelter system has come into shelter on their private jet and taken a limo to the shelter system. Folks are there because they have no other choice. And nobody wants to be in a shelter, right, if they had another choice. And I think he would know that if he spent a night in a homeless shelter. It's not exactly the most pleasant place to be.
Caesar is a homeless man who has chosen not to take advantage of the shelter program. Although he has been in over 7 shelters in the past, he now prefers to sleep on the street. He says that he feels unsafe in the shelters.
I've gotten stuff stolen. I've gotten clothes stolen. I went to the bathroom thinking that the place was all right in Bellevue or Bedford Atlantic or whatever, and came back, my pants be gone with my money, my ID. I can count maybe at least 4 or 5 times I had to replace ID. You might be sleeping one night and you might get a blanket over your head or a knife to your throat, ask you where the money is and all that. They pick on mainly the elderly.
In the past few years, Caesar has turned to private organizations like the Bowery Mission for help.
You be out on the street for more than a year or 2. Then they'll give you a few interviews, 4, 5, 6 interviews, then they'll come and get you.
Caesar is trying to get his life back together. Now in his late 60s, He's looking for affordable housing to avoid sleeping on the streets. But he may be waiting for a long time.
So, New York City has a very interesting low-income housing policy. What that means is that they don't really have one.
Essentially, in 2005, the Bloomberg administration ended a long-standing practice of providing homeless families with priority access to federal housing resources. So that means public housing and Section 8. So those are permanent, affordable housing resources that were highly effective at moving people out of shelter and also keeping them stably housed.
The research conducted by the Department of Homeless Services shows a steady increase since Bloomberg cut priority housing. The coalition believes this decision and the housing affordability gap are the reasons for the increase in the homeless. As the Bloomberg administration draws to a close, the coalition is hoping that better policies lie ahead. However, they recognize that there is even more work to be done.
Whoever enters office next term will be facing a very significant problem that will be much more difficult to address just by the sheer size of it.
Caesar is still waiting to hear from the Department of Homeless Services.
They want you to be discouraged enough to say, I ain't messing with y'all. I'm out of here. The discouraging thing. They don't care. They seem like they care, but they don't.
This is Rita Solomon.